The Butcher Who Smiled at the Gallows, The Hidden Truth About Hans Frank, the 16th of October, 1946. Inside the cold stone walls of Nuremberg prison, a man known to history as the Butcher of Poland steps forward toward the gallows. But unlike the other condemned men awaiting their fate, Hans Michael Frank does something unexpected. He enters with a faint, almost peaceful smile. Only weeks earlier, the world had listened as prosecutors laid bare his role in one of humanity's darkest chapters: the starvation of millions, the plunder of an entire nation, and the murder of millions of Jews under his administration in occupied Poland. Now, with the rope ready and witnesses watching, Frank's calm demeanor is almost surreal. Who was this man who once dined with Hitler, who ruled over a kingdom of death from the grand halls of Wawel Castle, and who now walked willingly toward the end? How did a cultured lawyer from Munich transform into one of the central architects of Nazi tyranny? And what events in his final years shaped this strange mixture of remorse and denial? Today, we retrace his life, his crimes, and his last moments, revealing the man behind that infamous smile. Hans Michael Frank's story unfolds against the turbulent backdrop of the 20th century's most devastating conflict, World War II. Born in 1900 Karlsruhe, Germany, he came of age during the political chaos following the First World War. The German Empire had collapsed, the economy lay in ruins, and radical political movements were fighting for dominance. Frank grew up in Munich, a city teeming with revolutionary energy and nationalist fervor. By the late 1910, he had joined the Freikorps, a paramilitary force of veterans battling communists in the streets. It was here that he began mingling with the nationalist and occultist circles that would help shape Nazi ideology. In 1919, he entered the German Workers' Party, soon to be renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party. By the 1932, as the Nazi movement rose to power, Frank's legal skills propelled him into Hitler's inner circle. He became the party's chief legal advisor and later served as Minister of Justice in Bavaria. More than just a bureaucrat, Frank was a loyal political operator, someone who could use law to legitimize authoritarian rule. But his most notorious chapter began in October 1939, when Hitler appointed him Governor General of occupied Poland. From his headquarters in Krakow's Wawel Castle, Frank ruled over a territory of 12 million people, including more than 1.5 million Jews. His domain became the heart of the Holocaust, home to extermination camps like Treblinka, Belzec, and Sobibor. The general government was officially a civil administration, but in practice, it worked hand in hand with the SS and Gestapo. Frank's policies starved ghettos, stripped communities of resources, and coordinated the deportation of Jews to the death camps. Although he later claimed the SS acted independently, his own orders and speeches prove that his administration was a key enabler of Nazi genocide. When the tide of war turned and Soviet forces began reclaiming Poland, Frank's empire crumbled. By January 1945, he fled Krakow, leaving behind documents that would become damning evidence at his trial. Months later, captured by American forces, he was sent to face justice at Nuremberg, a stage that would seal his fate. Chapter 1. From Munich's streets to Hitler's inner circle. Hans Frank's early political path was forged in the chaos of post-World War I Germany. At 17, he wore the uniform of the German army, but never saw frontline combat. After the armistice in 1918, he found himself in a country seething with unrest, where competing ideologies clashed violently in the streets. He joined the Freikorps, militant veterans who fought against communists and revolutionary uprisings. It was during these years that Frank crossed paths with members of the Thule Society, an esoteric nationalist group that influenced the early Nazi movement. By 1923, Frank was part of the Sturmabteilung, SA, the Nazi paramilitary force, and marched alongside Hitler in the ill-fated Beer Hall Putsch. The coup failed, leaving 16 Nazis and 4 police officers dead. Hitler was imprisoned. Frank fled to Italy, only returning when charges were dropped. Marriage followed. Brigitte Herbst, a politically ambitious stenographer, became his wife in 1925. Though their union was turbulent, they would have 5 children, and Brigitte's ambitions often drove Frank's own. His legal acumen caught Hitler's attention. By 1929, Frank was head of the Nazi Party's legal department and served as Hitler's personal legal advisor. Over the next 4 years, he handled over 2,000 400 legal cases for the party, often defending its violent and controversial actions in court. Chapter 2. The King of Poland. When the Nazis invaded Poland in September 1939, the conquest was swift and brutal. By October, Hitler carved out the central portion of the country as the general government, a special administrative zone under direct German control. He chose Hans Frank to govern it. From the grand halls of Wawel Castle in Krakow, Frank presided over 12 million people, including 1.5 million Jews. He envisioned the territory as a colony of the Reich, declaring that Poles should serve as slaves to Germany. Frank's administration enforced draconian laws. Jews were forced into ghettos, stripped of property, and starved. The Warsaw Ghetto alone crammed over 400,000 people into a walled prison, where disease and hunger claimed tens of thousands before mass deportations began in 1942. 4 of the 6 major Nazi extermination camps, Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor, and Majdanek, were within Frank's territory. While the SS ran the killing operations, his civil administration made them possible, identifying victims, confiscating resources, and coordinating transport to the camps. Despite occasional clashes with Himmler over SS authority, Frank's policies aligned with Nazi racial doctrine. He later claimed he didn't control the SS, but his speeches show otherwise. He knew exactly what was happening. Chapter 3. Resistance, Retaliation, and the Crumbling Empire. As the war dragged on, the tide began to turn. By late 1941, the German advance into the Soviet Union stalled, and Soviet forces began pushing back. Resistance movements inside Poland grew stronger, now supplied by the advancing Red Army. In January 1944, the Polish underground planted a bomb on Frank's train. The explosion derailed his carriage, but he survived unharmed. In retaliation, Polish prisoners were executed, and security across the general government tightened. The most dramatic challenge to his rule came on the 1st of August, 1944, the start of the Warsaw Uprising. For 2 months, Polish fighters battled German forces, but the rebellion was crushed. The city was systematically destroyed, and about 200,000 civilians were killed. By January 1945, Soviet troops were at Krakow's gates. Frank's family fled in December. He followed on the 17th of January, abandoning his capital and leaving behind offices filled with incriminating documents, records of theft, deportation orders, and administrative directives that would later appear in court. Chapter 4. Capture and Trial. Frank retreated to Bavaria, hoping to serve the collapsing Reich in any role, but he had no authority left. When he tried to issue orders, subordinates walked away. On May 4, 1945, American troops, just days after liberating Dachau, captured him at Tegernsee. The soldiers, enraged by what they had seen in the camps, made him walk through a corridor of men who jeered and struck him. Frank attempted suicide twice, failing both times. At Nuremberg, he faced charges of conspiracy, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Unusually among the defendants, Frank expressed partial remorse, calling himself possessed by a profound sense of guilt after learning the full scale of the atrocities. Still, he denied direct involvement in the extermination program, claims the evidence demolished. Chapter 5. The Gallows. On the 1st of October, 1946, Frank was sentenced to death. His reaction was calm. "Death by hanging, I deserved that, and expected it." 15 days later, he was led to the gallows. He was the 5th man to die that day, and the only one to enter with a faint smile. His last words, "I am grateful for the treatment received during my captivity, and ask God to receive me with mercy." The drop was too short. His neck did not break, and he convulsed for 11 agonizing minutes before dying. His body was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in the Isar River, erasing any place where admirers could gather. One of the most striking and least discussed aspects of Hans Frank's final days was the almost theatrical contradiction in his behavior. While many of the other Nuremberg defendants tried to project defiance or outright denial, Frank seemed determined to stage his own redemption arc, at least in the eyes of history. In prison, he converted to Roman Catholicism and claimed to have experienced a deep spiritual awakening. He spoke at length about guilt and repentance, telling the court that he had come to recognize the full horror of the atrocities committed. This apparent remorse set him apart from most of his co-defendants, yet it was shadowed by a clear attempt to downplay his own culpability. Even more unusual was his relationship with Gaston Ullmann, a Jewish journalist who covered the trial daily. Ullmann visited Brigitte Frank, sometimes bringing chocolate for her children. In a letter to her husband, Brigitte described him in words that still feel almost surreal. "He is Jewish, but I think he has a human heart." That such a sentiment emerged from the wife of the butcher of Poland speaks volumes about the strange and layered interactions that took place within the surreal environment of post-war justice. Then there was the execution itself. The U.S. Army's appointed hangman, Sergeant John C. Woods, had a reputation for botched hangings. Eyewitnesses claimed the drop length for the Nuremberg executions was deliberately miscalculated, ensuring the condemned did not die instantly from a broken neck. Instead, they strangled slowly. For Hans Frank, this meant 11 minutes of violent convulsions on the rope. Even in death, his story carried an unsettling ambiguity. Was it a final act of cosmic justice or a crude mishandling of one of history's most symbolic moments of accountability? And perhaps the most telling detail, his ashes, along with those of the other executed Nazi leaders, were scattered in the Isar River under military guard. No marked grave, no memorial, just water carrying away the physical remains of a man whose name would forever be linked to genocide. Hans Michael Frank's journey from an ambitious Munich lawyer to the governor of occupied Poland is a stark reminder of how ordinary ambition can merge with ideology to produce extraordinary evil. He was not a raving street radical, nor a battlefield commander, yet his policies starved cities, dismantled cultures, and helped send millions to their deaths. In the Nuremberg courtroom, Frank spoke of guilt, repentance, and God's mercy. But history remembers the tangible facts: the ghettos, the deportations, the stolen art, and the starving children. His faint smile on the gallows remains one of the trial's most haunting images, a final, ambiguous gesture from a man who could never fully reconcile his public contrition with the weight of his crimes. The Nuremberg Trials established a precedent that endures to this day. Leaders can be held accountable, even for crimes committed under the shield of state authority. Frank's body left no grave, no shrine, only a name etched into history as a warning. And so, I leave you with this question. When power and ideology tempt those in authority, how many more could walk the same path Hans Frank did, smiling into the abyss?